Right, so my book was The Killing Floor by Lee Child. So, brief synopsis. So, book starts out in a little cafe in Margrave, Georgia. Jack Reacher, retired military cop, is sitting there enjoying his breakfast when a cop busts through the door with a shotgun and arrests him for first-degree murder. Now, he's taken downtown to the police station where he's fingerprinted and everything, and he's sat in front of the town detective, and the detective starts talking to him, asking him, where he was last night, all that kind of stuff. And through the detective, Reacher finds out that a body was found in town, of course, coincidentally, the same night he entered town. And the body was found in the warehouse, it was dumped, the man was shot in the head, beaten up, it was really bad. But, of course, with Reacher being the outsider in town, it's a small town, everyone knows each other, Reacher's the easy target, so of course he's brought in. But there's one piece of evidence they looked over, the fact, and since Reacher himself being a military man, he's worked with this kind of stuff before, and in the military he was part of the military police, and so he knows a little bit about investigation. So through talking to the detective, he learns a little bit about what happened with the scene, and from one of the shoes they recovered, they found a phone number, and they call that number, and it turns out to be a local guy named Hubble, and Hubble is he works for one of the banks in the area. He has a lot of money, but his involvement to this whole thing is kind of unclear, so they haul Hubble in, talk to him too. When they start talking to Hubble, he doesn't say anything. He kind of clams up, he freaks out, he starts crying, kind of implying his inherent guilt in the situation. But seeing as it's a Friday night, they can't really do anything about it, so they just figure, hey, you know what, how about we just put him in jail for the weekend? We'll talk to him again on Monday. So Reacher and Hubble have to spend the weekend in jail, and when they're in jail, things start heating up because they're supposed to go to the 7th floor, which is like petty theft kind of thing, not really dangerous people. They are taken to the floor and the lights are out at that point in the prison. They wake up on the 3rd floor the next morning where all the murderers hang out. And coincidentally, the same floor where the main prison gang hangs out too. So they wake up the next morning and these 3 dudes bust in and they want Hubble dead. They make it very clear that Hubble needs to be killed. But before they can hurt Hubble, Reacher, of course, being the stud that he is, busts in and he beats all of them up and he breaks the guy's nose and gives another guy concussion. He fights them all off, and they make it through the weekend in prison. However, it's when they get out of prison that Reacher starts to put 2 and 2 together. Hubble doesn't look like he has anything to do with this. He looks like he's guilty, but there's more to it than that. Putting the pieces together, there had to have been at least more than one killer. Looking at the body, it being beaten all up, but at the same time there was also the gunshot wounds being consistent with someone very skilled. So Reacher's putting all this together, and he figures, they probably want Hubble dead because he's got something to do with this whole thing. So they get back to the police station on Monday morning. Reacher's name has finally been cleared. They finally put 2 and 2 together, and the police department figured out that it wasn't him. But it's when they get back, they review the fingerprints of the body, and they find out that it's actually Reacher's brother, who he hasn't seen in 13 years. They went their separate ways after their time in the military. And so at this point, Reacher's brother is dead, and at this point also Hubble goes missing too. On top of that, the chief of police in town is also killed because of his ties to the situation. And it all circles back to the people who run this town, in this old southern town, the old white folks that have been running this place since the slave trade still existed. It all ties back to them. So Reacher is like, you know what? This ends here with the chief dying. I'm going to find Hubble. I'm going to find out who actually did this. And I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And basically the rest of the story is him finding out who the actual killer is. And then what I looked at with this novel is Child's portrayal of inherently American story. It's got your secret agent or military man in this case. Of course, a lot of American locations and American feel to it. They're in part of the South. It's got that southern feel, and of course the action too. So again, looking at what Child sees as American inherently in this novel, and what that shows about our society as a whole. Because looking at some of his other novels, such as the one he wrote in 2017 called The Midnight Line, he addressed the opioid crisis and veterans dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. Again, issues that are inherent in American society. So with this novel, I'm just looking at like what Child saw as an inherent problem in American society in 1997. And the first one that comes up with this story being set in the South, of course, is racism and the ideals of the South that have continued to be pervasive in American society. And so a few of the quotes I was looking at, this is from Finley, the main detective. Now Finley, when the chief of police dies, Finley, as the lead detective, he's supposed to take over as chief of police. But Teal, the mayor, doesn't want that to happen. His family's run this town since before the slave trade existed, you know. They've always had the power. He doesn't want some guy like Teal, you know, Finley, like, doesn't want his kind stepping in and taking over. So, again, this is from Finley just talking about the town. He says, the town was run by some old Georgia type who couldn't remember slavery had been abolished. Again, talking about himself in the department, they said they got me marked as a token, an idiot, not to be promoted further. Makes sense in a way. And so that got me thinking, you know, what does Finley represent himself about American society? Because Finley, of course, is an African-American man being screwed over by the justice system. So what does this say about America as a whole? So I decided to look at some statistics from the justice system. So in 2003, black men were reportedly 12 times more likely to receive prison sentences for drug offenses, even though surveys had shown white and black people in the U.S. use and sell drugs at almost the same rate. Again, people using drugs in a similar rate and similar use and all that kind of stuff, but for some reason the black men are 12 times more likely to receive prison sentences. Again, going back to there being racial inequality and those ideals that have been around since the colonial era that still rear their heads even in modern America. Another one being that black drivers are 31% more likely to be stopped by the police than a white driver, according to a 2011 public police contract survey, which was reported by the Justice Department itself. Again, these are facts from the Justice Department. And so, after looking at this, I decided to look at another ideal that Child really addresses in the novel, which is violence itself. If you look at, you know, modern movies such as Deadpool, you know, it's very clear that people they want to consume this type of media. Deadpool, of course, being one of the most successful movies in recent history. But there's got to be more to it than that. So I was looking at, you know, some of these scenes from the novel, and this was one of the ones in the prison. This is one of the fights that broke out in the prison. So he says, then I cheated. Instead of counting to 3, I headbutted full in the face, came off the back foot with a thrust of the legs, and whipped my head forward and smashed into his nose. It was beautifully done. Must have caved his whole face in. I guess I pulped his nose and smashed both his cheekbones. Jarred his little brain around a little, real good. His legs crumpled and hit the floor like a puppet with the strings cut. Like an ox in the slaughterhouse, his skull cracked on the concrete floor. Now, with this imagery there, he really puts you into the situation. You know exactly what's happening. And he captures kind of the same feel that these kind of more violent movies tend to establish as well. So I started looking into, why is it exactly that in American society we want to see this kind of thing? So, conventional wisdom, of course, and I was looking at the Christian Resource Company, that was it. Part of the conventional wisdom saying, the more we consume of this, the more violent we are. But I decided, there's got to be more to it than that. So looking at modern psychiatric times, they took that as their standing point, and they went back a little further. Why do we seek out that type of media in the first place? It turns out we seek out this kind of thing because we look for that adrenaline from it, the emotional high we get from kind of putting ourselves in that situation with the characters. And again, it's a distraction for us from our everyday life, and for the American society this makes perfect. A lot of us are working 9 to 5 jobs, or we're students, having a busy life. We want some sort of distraction from it all. And this kind of outlet through all the violence kind of gives us something else to look forward to, something else to go home to at the end of the day and look forward to besides more work, more monotony. And I think Child really captures that through the novel, through scenes like this. Again, the reader is just drawn in by the imagery he portrays. And he clearly gets it down that this is very pervasive in American society. And that led me to the third main ideal I was looking at, was the ideal of the American idealized man. Jack Reacher, contrary to Tom Cruise's portrayal of him in all the movies, Well, you know, Tom Cruise being 5'7", 170 pounds, you know, Jack Reacher is 6'5", 250 pounds. He's a huge guy. He's the ideal man, you know, he's smart, he can fight anyone, he's slick around the women. He's the ideal guy. And just an example that I used from the novel, so this is again when they hauled him in to talk to him about the shooting. He kind of takes it all over at this point. He's telling Finley his theory on what happened. In a few minutes, he's already figured out one of these cops have put together in the past 24 hours. Again, bringing it back to him being the ideal man. He says, a guy who uses a silenced small caliber pistol for a neat headshot and an insurance shot is not the type of guy that suddenly goes berserk and then kicks the shit out of a couple of corpses, right? The type of guy who does get in a frenzy like that doesn't then suddenly calm down, hide the body under some old cardboard. You're looking at three completely separate things here, Finley. So there were three guys involved. And what interests me about this is, you know, characters like Reacher, they kind of have the talent that's expected of them. For every given situation, they so happen to be naturally gifted, you know? It comes to this, oh yeah, I've been in investigations like this before, or in the prison fight, oh yeah, I've fought like plenty of guys in my time kind of thing. And that just got me thinking, you know, as American men, why do we look for things like this too in American society? Why do we look for characters like this? You know, I think it all goes back to the thing that Child picked up here is that this all goes back to the foundation that's been built up of the expectations for the American man. You know, from the very beginning, before the revolution, or first settling down, you know, the man was the protector of the household. He was the one who would provide for everyone. He was the one who would basically get the community going. And I think at the same time, it's because we set these expectations so high that we tend to focus on caring for others, being the protector, you know, being the strong guy, you know, being the manly man. And one of the sources I looked at showed that American men tend to view themselves as more manly than other men. When just comparing American men in Britain and British men, they tend to view themselves as more manly in general. But that kind of got me thinking, for all this perceived, you know, manliness, it's kind of that paradox where portraying one thing often hints at an insecurity or some sort of falling short. And I think one thing that Child kind of gets at here is that despite all that we do to take care of others as American men, the people we tend to neglect are ourselves. And one of the things I kind of looked at, other than, of course, Reacher dealing himself with all the emotional trauma of everything he's been through recently. He's seen, you know, the body of his brother. He's seen the corpse of the chief of police. And he's seen all of these things, but he can't take care of himself. And one of the things I looked at, just how American men take care of themselves, is our own health. And we tend to fall short. 55.6%, that's the, 12.4 is the percent of American men who are in poor health as deemed by the CDC. 55.6 is the percent of men who meet federal standard physical activity, you know, some form of moderate physical activity every day to promote general health. So barely more than half of us get that on a daily basis. 34.5% the percent of America who are obese, and 32.6% of men who have hypertension. Again, going back to all this, a lot of them fail to take care of themselves, and they fall short of this ideal. They can't all be like Reacher, and it's because characters like Reacher exist, so they have some sort of outlet, something to turn to kind of strive to be. And I believe Child really nailed that down in showing that, again, that ideal is there, but it will always be kind of hanging over our heads, something we may never accomplish. And that's it.